Hello everyone, I'm back. I'm doing another tier list. This time I'm going to be talking about 24 different common chest exercises, and I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of each of them and put them in rank categories according to how valuable they are for most people in most circumstances, generally pursuing size and strength. So with that, let's kick it off with we're going to start with all the barbell presses. The bench press. This is a great exercise. You can go really heavy on it. It incorporates the triceps, the entire chest, as well as the shoulders really well. I think it is a little bit overrated. I think it's very good at a lot of things, but frankly, I think it's great at nothing. I am going to put it in the A tier. I do think it's a good exercise, but I think its best use is for impressing your friends, which I think has some merit of itself. Um, Moving on, incline bench. I find personally that as I incline my chest up, I get a little bit more joint excursion, a little bit better range of motion. Additionally, with the incline and a shoulder flexion component, we are getting a lot more involvement out of the clavicular head of the chest. I think this is the gold standard for developing strength and size in the upper head of the chest, the clavicular head. But more than that, I think if you look at sports like football or rugby, a lot of the athletic sort of pressing motions, your torso isn't going to be vertical. You lean into it, and I think this incline press is a lot more representative of athletic pressing motions that we see. So I think this is a excellent exercise for practical strength as well. I'm going to put the incline bench in the S tier. Decline bench, I think the incline bench gives me a little bit better joint excursion. I find the decline bench gives me a little bit less. Additionally, you're putting at the bottom of the press, your shoulder is in an abducted and internally rotated position, which is our textbook recipe for impingement of the subacromial compartment. I don't think it's particularly extreme with regards to this exercise, but this still isn't my favorite thing for the shoulders. And although the idea is we can target the sternal head like the incline bench targets the clavicular head, this doesn't quite do it for me. I still think this is an okay exercise, but I don't think it's good at anything in particular. I'm going to put it in the C tier. The close grip bench press with the narrower shoulders, or with the narrower elbow positioning, you get more of a shoulder flexion component similar to the incline bench press, which I think this becomes a great option for developing the clavicular head of the chest as well. However, relatively, it's also going to be much more demanding for the triceps, which might limit your ability to target the chest in particular. It kind of depends on where you're at and what your goals are. I do think it's a very strong option. I'll put it in the B tier. Compare it to the underhand bench press, which this actually feels very similar to a close grip bench press, in my opinion, for the chest. However, when you rotate your hands like that, it really takes your triceps out of the picture. So I think this is another really great option. I do want to give you fair warning, this is kind of awkward, and if you're not really familiar with what you're doing, I think this can potentially be a great way to hurt yourself. But if you are careful and wise, then I think this is a great option for targeting the upper chest and the shoulders in particular as well. I'll put it in the, and we'll go B tier on that one as well. That wraps up the barbells, so we can move on to dumbbells. And let's see, I have 4 different dumbbell pressing options here, and just in general, comparing dumbbells to a barbell press, a lot of people say you can get a tighter squeeze at the top, and depending on the size of the dumbbell and the grip you might take on a barbell, that certainly can be true, but there's no resistance at the top. Okay, if you know anything about torque and angles, that contraction that you get at the top is not against resistance, so I don't think that's particularly valuable. Additionally, especially as you get into using bigger dumbbells, you're not going to be able to bring your hands all the way to your chest like you would with a barbell. I think this actually interferes with range of motion, something kind of universal to dumbbells. And in general, the loading capacity for dumbbells is going to be lower as well. So while I think dumbbells are certainly viable options for training, I think they're in pretty much every case going to be just a little bit inferior to their barbell counterpart. So with that being said, the flat dumbbell bench, all those arguments I've made still apply to this. I still think it's a good option, but I'm just going to put it one notch below the bench press. I'll put it in the B tier. Incline dumbbell, same thing. I think these are, I think the disadvantages to a dumbbell are slightly less pronounced in the incline bench because, like I said, with the barbell, I think there's a little bit more opportunity for joint excursion. Also, you'll be using smaller dumbbells, so you're less likely to contact your chest or have less spacing issues there. So I still don't think it's quite what a barbell is, but I'll put it in the A tier. Decline dumbbell, all the same problems as well. Super strong in decline, so you would like to use big dumbbells, but nobody's going to be climbing on a decline bench with 120-pound dumbbells in their hands. Super uncomfortable, super awkward. Yeah, put it a notch below the barbell, and that's going to be our first one in the D tier. All right, a close grip dumbbell. This is very similar to a close grip bench press or an underhand bench press as well. But the difference here is you take a neutral hand position, and I think that I enjoy that a lot more. Right, it feels a lot more natural on my shoulders. That being said, I still don't think you can go as heavy as you would be able to on a close grip bench press or anything. I still think barbells are generally better, but because of that neutral hand grip position, I'm not going to knock this one down from its barbell counterpart. I'll put that in a B tier. And with that, we can move on to machine presses. And there are so many different types of machines. I can't possibly go through all of them depending on how they're all made. There's flywheel resistance types and levers, and I'll just show you a few to kind of demonstrate some of the points. In general, something I talked about with the back is that because there's so many complicated muscles, as well as scapular motion and shoulder motion are both so pronounced, I generally prefer free weights for those. The chest is much simpler, and I think you can get a whole lot of value out of machines. But this first machine that I'll show is a major component of my chest routine right now. The way the seat is contoured and the way the handles move throughout the range of motion. This is almost perfect for the sternal head of my chest. I absolutely love this. I'm going to put it in the S tier, and more importantly than that, I'm just saying that I think machines, if they line up well for your body and how the machine is designed, I think they absolutely have the potential to be incredibly valuable. But just as an example, this second machine is a lever incline machine, and it's so close, but it basically just comes out to being an inferior incline press for me. So it's not something that I would ever include in place of a barbell bench press unless I had maybe some kind of injury or something and wasn't able to use a barbell. But it just doesn't quite cut it for me. And this third machine I'll show you, this one I absolutely hate. It's like it can't decide whether it wants to be a flat press or an incline press, and it just doesn't feel right for any reason. So that's going to be an example of the D tier. I mean, ultimately, what it's going to come down to is the contour of the machine and how your body fits it, and your mind-muscle connection as well. And in general, I would advise, if that's not something you're familiar with, maybe if you're newer to the gym, I would advise just starting with free weights until you can really get a good feel for that, for what makes a machine good. I would start with free weights. Okay, so we got the barbell presses, we got dumbbell presses, and we got the machines. Next up, we're going to do fly options, starting with the dumbbell fly. I used to love these. But as I've sort of learned and experienced more, I've found that there are a lot better options. I think one of the disadvantages to a dumbbell fly is that there's only resistance at the bottom, and that's so pronounced, right? The amount of resistive torque at the shoulder joint is going to be, in this case, almost directly proportional to the angle, right? As we would see, calculating torque in basic physics, and that's in stretched position. So I certainly think this is a valuable way to train, but there are other ways we can accomplish that, as well as having resistance throughout the entire range of motion. Additionally, I do think the dumbbell flies can sometimes cause shoulder issues, and they're just not going to be the first thing I would advise. If you like them, I do think they can benefit you for sure, but I would say there's always going to be a better option, and I would put them in the C tier for that. The incline dumbbell fly, all the same things, really. Um, yeah, pretty much exactly the same, except it's going to target your incline chest a little bit more as well. But for all the same reasons, I'm going to put it in the C tier. The cable fly, this has been my bread and butter. There is nothing that just resonates pectoral fury like me doing a set of cable flies. I absolutely love these. It depends on how the length of your arms and how you position your body, as well as the distance between the cables and the height you use. There's a lot of different ways you can set it up, but I've always been able to set it up that it feels just absolutely perfect for, not quite so much for the upper head of the chest. I tend to angle it so that it favors the lower portion of the chest, and that I have a depressive component with the scapula as well. But there's a lot of things you can do with it, and also the resistance profile of the cable. I think you can set it up so that it very closely mirrors the strength profile of your chest. I don't think there's many better options than a cable fly done well. I absolutely love these. I do them every single chest day that I can. The incline cable fly, mechanically, it has a lot of the same. You could make a lot of the same arguments that I would for a cable fly, and I see a whole lot of people doing these. It seems like it could be such a really good exercise, but I'll be honest, just in my personal experience from trying it out, it doesn't quite seem to hit the spot. I think that's probably because maybe with the cables and setting it up on an incline, maybe I'm not getting as much of a horizontal adduction component as I would on like an incline bench or something, but it just doesn't quite hit the spot for me personally. If you like these, I don't want to necessarily discourage you from doing them because mechanically it makes a lot of sense, but for me it just doesn't quite hit the spot, and I'm gonna put them in the C tier. A machine fly. This is you get a lot of the same benefits that you can from like a cable fly or something. I think the biggest difference though is that depending on the machine, but the vast majority of machines, like I said with the cable fly, how the resistance profile matches the strength profile of your muscle. You don't get that with the machine fly, right? I think they tend to be more difficult towards the end range of the motion. So I just don't think I can quite juice as much out of these as I can with cables. I certainly think they're a great option, and I love that we are getting resistance at the towards as the chest approaches the midline. There's not a lot of exercises that do that. I do think these are good. I think they're not as good as a cable though. I'll put those in the A tier. The next is a little bit more unconventional. This is another exercise I got from Athlete X. He shares a lot of really kind of strange and inventive things, and I love to try them out. I'll be honest, most of them I don't love, but this is one that I actually do love. I especially love personally after my last set of cable flies. What I like to do right now, when I finish my last set of cable flies, I will go immediately into these cable ground pounds using the same weight. And if you haven't tried it, it's really interesting because one arm is going to be stationary on the ground, and so you're actually using the pec of that stationary arm to rotate your torso a little bit, which is still a shoulder horizontal adduction component. It's great. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things you can do with this. If you haven't tried it out, give it a try. I'm going to put it in the A tier. And then with that, I'll move on to a few kind of awkward exercises. The plate press here. I see people doing these every once in a while, and it's kind of interesting. You just kind of itches you like, oh, I want to try that out. With the plate press as well as the standing plate press, the challenge to the muscle is not moving the weight, it's clasping your hands together especially at the end range of motion. And the difficulty is so much more difficult at the end range of motion, and that's something that's so pronounced that it almost feels to me like I'm doing isometric training. You're doing almost nothing when the weight is close to you, and I just think it's a little awkward, and it doesn't feel fun to me, and you're only using your muscle in such a narrow range of motion. I think this is gonna get a D tier, honestly, as well as the standing plate press. For all the same reasons. This one's it's going to be a little more challenging for your deltoids, right? Obviously, there's much more of a shoulder flexion component, but for all the same reasons, I'm going to put that in the D tier as well. If you do like these, if you do really like that tight squeeze at the very end range of the motion, try a machine fly, maybe, right? I think you can have a similar experience there, except you're doing a lot more work throughout a larger range of motion as well. The dumbbell pull over. I talked about this exercise a little bit when I did my tier list for back exercises, and I would generally call this a back exercise as well. But here's the thing: when your arm is straight overhead, the sternal head of your chest in particular is in an excellent position to do shoulder extension, right? Or to pull your arm back down. So you will get some involvement of particularly the sternal head of the chest when you do this exercise. But here's the thing: when you're in that position, the sternal head of the chest is also in such an excellent position to also contribute to a scapular depression, and so you can, I think, drastically increase the engagement of the chest by taking the same movement pattern and putting your body in a vertical position, which would be called a straight arm pull down. Okay, with that scapular depression component, you're going to get much more involvement from the sternal head of the chest. I didn't actually include that exercise in here because I would still call it a back exercise. Okay, right. I think all the muscles of your scapula as well as your lats are going to contribute a lot more to the movement. But if you really want to include your chest in this way, my recommendation would be to do it vertically as a straight arm pull down. As far as the pull over goes, specifically for a chest exercise, additionally, you're only working again at the end range of motion, which again is a stretch position, and it can be valuable, but it's just you can do more at the same time. So with considering the vertical alternative, that it mostly works the back and that we're only working at the end range of motion, I'm going to give this I'm going to put it in a D tier for chest. For back, I would put it higher because I think it does a little more for the back, but for the chest, I'm going to put the pullover in the D tier. Next up, we're going to do push-ups, and I did two versions of these. Kind of the traditional push-up. People keep their body straight. They just kind of do these little bouncing, super short range of motion. I think a lot of people undervalue the push-up because of the way that they've been taught, or maybe it's just their self-awareness. But I think they tend to view these as, okay, I'll just do a few supersets after my bench press or something like that. They just look at them as this super easy exercise, and it ends up just being junk volume a lot of the time. And so I think that's what it ends up being, junk, basically. But I want to compare it to a push-up with stricter form, where we implement a little bit more biomechanics. Okay, I made a whole video about this actually, but basically what we're going to do to make a push-up more difficult, we're going to keep the hips slightly elevated. We're doing everything we can to put that pressure of the entire body through the hands, and then we're going to use a full range of motion. We're going to keep our head up so that we can get our chest all the way down to the ground. We're going to keep our feet together. Push-ups are hard, okay? Especially, it's really easy to throw just one plate on your back, and even with one plate on your back, come have me coach you. I promise you're not going to be able to do half as many as you think. I would put these on the same ground as bench press, right? Of course, they do become more difficult to load up, but if you're bench pressing 3 or 4 plates, then sure, you might be strong enough to kind of brush the push-up aside. But I see you guys in the gym, and I know that you could be getting a lot of value out of push-ups that you're just not getting because of your technique. So I'm going to put a A good solid push-up I'm going to put in the A tier. I think it's very comparable to a bench press, actually, except it probably uses a little more of the clavicular head and tricep and the sternal head, but than compared to a bench press. But it's definitely a great exercise. Next up, or last up, actually, is dips, and I should have done probably two for these as well, because this is one where your technique is going to make a big difference. In particular, range of motion. I don't know what it is about these exercises. I see so many people doing dips, and they're going up and down 3 inches. Okay, I actually don't like to use a full range of motion. I've done a lot of time where I bring my shoulders literally down all the way to my hands. I like to go just kind of two parallel, and that has to do with because the way your body positioning shifts as as your shoulders cross your elbow when you get the maximum horizontal distance, right? Your body has to shift a little bit. So I like to just kind of approach parallel and go back up, but most people aren't even doing that. But the great thing about this is, I talked about the not the scapular, the sternal head of the chest, and how it can contribute to scapular depression. There's no opportunity to do that better than when you're, suspended and your weight is all on your hands. This is perfect for that. But you also get a really good stretch in the clavicular head and the deltoid as well. This is just an excellent exercise. I'm going to put that in the S tier. I love to see people include those. Also, you can weight them up, right? You grab a belt, you can even just put a dumbbell between your legs if you want. You can go really heavy with dips. I think those are absolutely going to be in the S tier. One of my favorite exercises. There we go. And just like that's all the exercises. And just like with the back exercises, if you want to know what my program looks like, there it is. You have it. S tier, right? But if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them for me. I love to interact with you guys and get back to those. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe. That's also helpful for me. Other than that, thank you everyone, and have a great day.